没有人会永远年轻，但永远有人在期待踏上9又3/4站台的那一天。哈利波特宇宙中有国际法存在吗？食死徒的罪行是否构成反人类罪？邓布利多军的成员们是否构成童子军？最近我也是读到了一本书，叫《从国际法的视角看哈利波特》，回答了这些问题。说实话，我一开始以为是个恶搞作品，读着读着发现这玩意儿居然真的是按照教材的思路去写的，也是相当离谱了。国家是国际法中的基础概念，那么巫师的世界里有国家吗？从传统国际法学的角度，国家的基本要素包括明确领土、常住人口、政府和外交联系。作者经过一系列计算得出结论英国的巫师数量应该远远超过3000名，这已经远超梵蒂冈的人口，也是纽埃这种岛屿国家常住人口的2倍。所以常住人口没毛病。政府就更不用说了魔法部无人不知无人不晓。在此之前呢，还有巫师委员会。魔法部实质上是一个高度组织化和复杂化的官僚体制，不仅有分管不同领域的中央部委还会开展外交工作。比如首任魔法部部长访问的肖像还挂在唐宁街10号麻瓜首相的书房里，以及在伏地魔回归时期鲁夫斯还造访了英国首相的办公室。所以由此看来魔法部的确就是一个政府。至于领土和建交领土的问题呢，因为麻瓜不可见，难以确定。但霍格莫德村的存在和地界的明确，也让我们能够给予肯定的回答。对于建交问题，魔法部里甚至专门有管理这一事务的部门，即魔法合作署旗下的3个司：国际巫师联合会、国际魔法法律中心和国际魔法贸易标准机构。可见不同的魔法国家之间的确存在着一个复杂的协议网络，用来促进和规范彼此之间的合作。由此可知，即使在魔法世界，也依然存在着国家的概念。那么，巫师所犯的罪行，哪个国家有管辖权呢？从英国巫师的例子来看，似乎的确存在着麻瓜和巫师之间就谁对巫师所犯罪行有管辖权的协议。比如小天狼星据传杀死了12个麻瓜，但是仍然在魔法世界受审关押，说明属人管辖权似乎更为好用。正如邓布利多校长所言，所有新巫师都必须接受，进入我们的世界就要遵守我们的法律。毕竟无论怎么想，让麻瓜警察局关注会阿拉活动开的巫师，确实也是强人所难了。然而说到小天狼星，他因为杀害12个麻瓜以及 Peter 被关押在阿兹卡班12年，这大小也算个重罪了。但他入狱却没有经历任何审判程序，魔法执法队队长老克劳奇就直接把他关进了阿兹卡班。根据《公民与政治权利国际公约》的第14条第1款，在法律面前一律平等，以及接受公正和公开审理的权利，以及第2款，在审判结束之前不能推定其有罪。看来英国魔法部还是要加强法治建设，提升人权治理水平。不过，巫师世界里侵犯人权的案例可以说比比皆是。例如，乌姆里奇独特的授课方法放在今天恐怕严重违反了禁止酷刑公约。但是，对家养小精灵的奴役到底算不算侵犯人权呢？恐怕这也是一个需要讨论的问题。这本书从哈利波特中的案例入手，却又有非常完整的结构和逻辑，内容体例与国际法课本大概相同。如果你是一个哈利波特和国际法的双重爱好者，这本书确实值得一读。不过我还是很好奇这本书的作者究竟是怎么产生的这个脑洞。于是我稍微发动了一下犬脉，终于找到了本尊约了个采访。
Do you see yourself as a wizard or a muggle?
That's a good question. So I unfortunately believe it's a muggle. I've been waiting for my Hogwarts letter, but it's still not gotten here. I might have moved one too many times, but so muggle for now.
So you believe that as a muggle you can still contribute to the construction of legal framework for the magic world?
Well, if you look at it, they definitely need some help. So they don't seem to have it fully under control. They have a bunch of different priorities. So I felt there's a bit of a room for us muggles to pitch in.
The Harry Potter series was recently re-released in China. Which episode is your favorite?
For me, it's definitely the 4th one. The 4th one came out when I was just able enough to read the books in English, that I was able to get the English edition before they translated into German. And it was interestingly on a family trip in Beijing when I bought the book in English. So I have quite fond memories that also link back to China and Harry Potter in that sense. For me, the fourth one was not only special because it was the first one that I read in English, but also because I think for me it shows that fundamental shift where the wizarding world shuffles from being this relatively peaceful place where Harry is growing up and maturing to that more complex place where wizards from different schools are coming to Hogwarts. You have this international community coming together at the Quidditch games, and then suddenly all of it taking a darker turn. And you can really see that transition from them being young kids to growing up. And I like that both in the books and in the movies. It's quite special, I find.
How did you come up with the idea of writing this book?
So I think, the essence of coming up with the idea of writing this book was essentially me and my best friend, who also had a law background, spending a night, and over a couple of beers, we just at some point somehow got into a deep discussion about whether we would consider the wizarding world a state under international law. And then we got really hooked on that question. And then we just kind of jumped from like question to question, and we got deeper and deeper into like a bunch of discussions around the wizarding world and international law. And at some point decided, why not really write a book about it? Because it's not been done and it sounded like a fun project.
I see. So it's not from your dissertation.
No, it's not from my dissertation. It's really a separate. So I did my dissertation in international law and I enjoyed that. But I think part of me was, I've always been a Harry Potter nerd. And at some point, part of me also felt there should be a way to write an entertaining law textbook. It's a lot of fascinating content that is prepared in a way that is incredibly hard to swallow and really difficult to process, even if you're deep into the content. So then I figured, why not use that idea to create something that is a bit easier for people to digest?
I never read a law book. Interesting.
No,
I don't know. I never read a law textbook. Interesting that to, as you mentioned, entertainment. Try to entertain people. So I think that's the reason I think this book is fantastic.
Dobby is a free elf is very popular to be used for celebrating new chapters in one's lives. But do you think Dobby truly became a free elf?
I'm a huge Dobby fan, and I the sentiment of this. I'm a free elf now. I've also used that in the past, and I think it's very applicable. So what I look at in the book, and it's really just a narrow part of the entire story. When we assess human rights law, one of the questions that comes up is the treatment of house elves and whether that is enslavement or not, and we would have to classify that. Now, the challenge I encountered when trying to make that point is that human rights law, requires us to take a look at humans. And the challenge here is that house elves in itself, the wizarding world, always fall under the magical creatures regulations that you would have. I think for me, morally, it shouldn't be a question that you should apply the same principles to them as creatures that have so many similarities with us and enslaving them and all of that. I think all of that movement that has gone on in the book as well, it's difficult to apply human rights law to them. So you can't directly, the implications would be.
Do you think Dementors also deserve protection?
If you say you want to have a comprehensive regulation of magical creatures, yes, you'll have to regulate Dementors. And you regulate them in a way that you ensure they don't harm anyone, but also they don't get harmed.
Does the Harry Potter book itself violate the international statute of secrecy?
Look, yes, the books are a clear violation of it. That's a clear violation. So I think somebody somewhere is definitely getting their day in magical court for that.
Do you think the existence of the international statute of secrecy is justified?
Now, on whether it's reasonable to have or not, my argument would be, given the state of world affairs and the complexity we are facing, I don't think that adding the existence of the wizarding world out into the open to it right now would necessarily be helpful. So it's probably good to keep that a bit separate for now and say, we keep them and just in secret, let them do their stuff. We keep on sorting out the stuff on our end, and that hopefully leads to better outcomes on both sides.
So do you think with magic existing, actually international law could be better enforced, as the current Muggle world, actually, there's quite debatable whether international law can be actually used in reality.
I think it's a good question. I think the challenge is a bit that if you assume that the wizarding world and the way that states function is the same way that it does in the Muggle world, meaning that states are equal to one another and that you don't have any hierarchical system, then even if you add magic to it, it doesn't fundamentally change the way that it works. Because whether we have magic or not, I mean, yes, some parts might be a bit easier to enforce, but then again, if people want to obstruct the legal system, they have magic in their hands. So they might also be, it might be easier for them to get away with it.
So you're arguing like we have nuclear power today, we have many power to enforce the law, just no one want to enforce it, or just not many people, not many countries want to enforce.
I mean, I would argue I think there's a lot of room for us to be bleak about the way that we enforce international law. And I know there's a lot of examples where we're not doing a great job, but there's also many aspects where international law is working. It's just not in the flashy areas where you see it every day. It might set a few ground principles and standards on some, but then it would work in the shadows in the background on some other elements.
I will agree. Otherwise, my research will be useless at all. So, what advice would you give to wizards currently researching Muggle international laws?
Oh, if we have wizards researching Muggle international law, I mean, that's interesting. I think if you have a wizard researching Muggle international law, they should totally reach out to either you or me, because I think understanding fundamentally how we work as a society is going to be important for anyone to understand the legal construct that is behind it. But then I think also understanding that there are some principles that seem to apply across both worlds. So even if there's distinctions on how they function and operate, there seem to be a couple at least of fundamental principles we all agree on, and I think that's interesting to explore.
感谢大家的收看，也感谢弗劳克·海德曼女士接受我的采访。我感觉或许之后哪位朋友也可以写一本《三体》中的国际法，不知道有没有市场。让我们下次再见了，大家拜拜。